What a difference a week makes. Just 5 days ago, the race for U.S. Senate in Missouri was wide open with a field of candidates. Well, now the voters have spoken, and we look to November, which will likely prove to be a big challenge for the Democratic nominee and an independent wild card as they work to beat the GOP's choice for senator. Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt ousted the competition in the Republican primary Tuesday, getting 46% of the vote. Look at that. It's more than twice what Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler pulled in and way ahead of former Missouri Governor Eric Greitens.
And I am going to Washington on a mission to protect freedom and opportunity for the next generation, for my kids, for your kids. We should leave them with an inheritance. The birthright of every American is freedom and liberty and opportunity.
On the Democratic side, Trudy Busch Valentine won a much closer race against Marine veteran Lucas Kunce, with Spencer Toder getting about 5% of the vote. Democratic nominee says she's ready to get to work.
I'm going to put our differences aside and embrace what unites us. I'm going to do what every public servant should do: serve the people they represent and reach across the party aisle so we can all work together.
Busch Valentine comes from a wealthy family and threw millions of her own dollars into the race. She didn't take part in a single debate during the primary campaign, but it is important to note none of the candidates did. Michael Mahoney, we've had Trudy Busch Valentine here on the program before. She claims she will debate her Republican challenger. What's your take here?
She doesn't have a choice. She comes into this as the clear underdog in the race against a Republican, Eric Schmitt, and the underdog always wants a debate so that voters see them and their opponent on equal footing. Now we'll see if that happens. I suspect it will. There may only be one of them, but it's going to happen. And the other thing is Trudy Busch Valentine is going to have to sharpen her game a little bit. She had very limited public appearances. She was not fast on her feet at many of those, and she's got to sharpen her game a little bit. Interestingly, I think that we could have had a different outcome on this primary had Spencer Toder not been in this race. Lucas Kunce finished about 5 points behind off the top of my head. Toder was another progressive candidate in that race. He pulled about 10-12. If he's not in that race, then Lucas Kunce, they ran a pretty good campaign, started quite a while ago, may have had a shot at eking it out, but obviously that didn't happen.
Right. Now, let's talk about the Republicans here. We saw former President Trump come like the night of the election, right before, and endorse Eric in all caps. And then we saw Attorney General Eric Schmitt and former Governor Eric Greitens kind of run with it. They had videos ready to go saying, hey, look, former president endorsed me. Did this help Schmitt at all with his victory?
No, I don't believe it did. It came too late. It came on Monday afternoon, about 13 hours before the polls opened. Neither campaign, Greitens or Schmitt, had the opportunity to convert it around in an ad. There was a very intense lobbying at Bedminster, New Jersey over the weekend where Donald Trump was. Both the Schmitt team and the Greitens team that are within the Trump circle lobbied hard for their candidate, and ultimately it came down to Donald Trump splitting the baby, if you will, and endorsing Eric. And at one point, some of the reports I've read said that even Donald Trump thought this might be too cute by one half.
Right, and just not nearly enough time in between the endorsement and when people went to the polls.
It was a wash.
You know, Missouri hasn't elected a Democrat to the U.S. Senate in a decade. Does Trudy Busch Valentine have any real path to victory here?
Everybody has a path to victory. Hers is narrow. She's got to catch every break and have to run a very good campaign. She is running in a Republican state. She is going to try to make the choice issue the main element of her campaign. It's one of the few things that she was most definitely clearest about, even when she started her campaign a few months ago. She will have to effectively put Eric Schmitt, who is staunchly pro-life, on his heels on that, and everything that she does on the abortion issue in this race is going to be complicated and handicapped by the fact that the Democrats are still going to run into some serious headwinds in this campaign and every campaign across the nation in November because of the economics, the inflation, gas prices, all of this sort of stuff are still major issues, and to the degree that the Bush campaign or any Democrat can trump that on the abortion question is going to be very, very difficult. Dems are running into some severe economic condition headwinds.
On the abortion issue, I have to imagine we're going to start to see pictures of Eric Schmidt signing that trigger ban moments after the Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade in attack ads, that sort of thing.
Now, it might end up being in his ads.
Good point.
Depending on how the dynamics of this air war in the Senate race plays out, I can envision Eric Schmidt saying, and within minutes after the Roe decision, I signed the order implementing Missouri's heartbeat bill. So it will be able to, we'll see how big of an issue is. I expect it to be a major cog for the Democrats, but again, they have got this very, very 600-pound gorilla of the economic situation in the country right now that is going to be complicating for every Democrat on the ballot in every state, in every race.
Real quick, let's talk about this independent candidate. We have to. John Wood, trying to run as a more moderate opponent, backed by prominent Republicans. What role does he play in this race?
He's going to run as a center-right candidate, which means that potentially it's more likely that he takes votes away from Eric Schmidt than Trudy Busch Valentine. There was a lot of speculation that had Eric Greitens won this, he was most definitely in, but if Greitens lost, which he certainly did, then maybe the Wood campaign would fold its tent. But Wood told me last week he is most definitely in it and will stay in it no matter who was running for the Republicans. In this case, it's going to be Eric Schmidt. We'll see how he goes. He's going to have some money, but an independent campaign is a real effort to it inside straight.
Hasn't been done statewide before. All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks, Mahoney.